June 28, 1914. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was a signal to all the great powers, which they thought had time to prepare for the coming war. Very soon, a war broke out in Europe, the scale of which no one can imagine. Almost immediately after the start of active hostilities, the Ottoman Empire entered the war on the side of the Central Powers, due to which both military and merchant ships of the Entente countries lost the opportunity to freely pass through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles. It should be mentioned that plans to capture the Dardanelles were considered by the British Defence Committee as early as 1906, but at that time they were considered too risky. After the outbreak of World War I, the Entente Command was forced to return to these plans. On November 3, 1914, two British battlecruisers, together with French battleships, bombarded the Ottoman forts located on the banks of the strait. Having fired at the Ottoman forts, but without inflicting serious damage on them, the Allied ships left the vicinity of the strait. In turn, the Ottomans took the demonstrative shelling of the forts as seriously as possible. Immediately after the Allied ships left the Dardanelles, the Ottomans hastily set up additional minefields, as well as additional coastal batteries. On January 2, 1915, the commander-in-chief of the Army of the Russian Empire, Grand Duke Nicholas Nikolaevich, turned to the Entente allies with a request to carry out demonstrative actions in the area of the Straits in order to divert part of the Ottoman forces from the fighting in the Caucasus. The British command held an urgent meeting and decided to provide assistance to the Russian Empire. According to the plan, the Allied fleet was to break through the enemy defenses in the Dardanelles and reach the outskirts of Constantinople. It should be mentioned that the command of the Army of the Russian Empire in 1915 developed a plan for the landing of troops in the vicinity of Constantinople, but due to the lack of forces caused by the fighting on the Eastern and Caucasian fronts of the First World War, the implementation of this plan was postponed until 1917. In turn, the British command believed that in the event of a successful Dardanelles operation, the Russian Empire would certainly land in the vicinity of Constantinople and take part in the siege of the city, which, after the end of the war, the Allies promised to transfer to the power of the Russian Emperor. According to the plans of the British command, the Allied fleet was to destroy the outer forts of the Ottomans, as well as intermediate fortifications, after which, having overcome the minefields, enter the Sea of Marmara. To implement this plan, an Anglo-French squadron was formed, consisting of 80 ships, including 24 minesweepers. The fleet had to act independently without the help of the army. Unfortunately for the Entente, the spies of the Central States learned about the planning of the Dardanelles operation, thanks to which the Ottomans managed to strengthen the defenses of the strait in a timely manner, as well as draw additional forces. On February 19, 1915, 6 Allied ships began shelling the Ottoman fortifications. This attack did not bring the desired result, since the Allies could not destroy the defensive fortifications. On February 25, after a long shelling, the Allies still managed to suppress several Ottoman coastal batteries, after which the Allied fleet began to overcome the minefields. 3 battleships were moving behind the minesweepers, which were supposed to provide their protection. The Allies failed to fulfill their plans, as they fell under heavy fire from the Ottoman coastal artillery and had to retreat. The general attack on the Dardanelles began on March 18. By this time, the Ottoman command had managed to strengthen the forts, as well as install additional minefields in the strait. At 10:30 on March 18, the Allied ships entered the strait. In turn, the Ottoman command decided to let the enemy get closer. Only when the Allied fleet came closer to the forts and coastal batteries did the Ottomans open heavy artillery fire. 2 Allied ironclads received serious confirmation from artillery fire, and 4 more ships were blown up by mines. At 1800 hours, the Allied command ordered their ships to stop the operation and return to their original positions. It became obvious that it would not be possible to force the Dardanelles, but the Allied command did not plan to surrender. A new plan was developed, according to which the enemy coastal batteries should be suppressed by landing. For the landing on the Gallipoli Peninsula, it was decided to use an assault force consisting not only of British and French detachments, but also of New Zealand and Australian units. According to the plan developed, British troops were to land at Cape Helles at the same time additional British forces, mainly consisting of New Zealand and Australian soldiers, were to land at Anzac Bay. At the same time, the French forces were to make a diversion by landing on the Asian coast of the strait in the Cumbrae region. The landing operation began on April 25, 1915. British troops began simultaneous landings at Cape Helles, at 5 pre-selected locations. As soon as the British soldiers began to disembark, they came under heavy artillery fire from the Ottomans. Despite this, the British continued the landing operation. The Allied army suffered heavy losses, but it still managed to complete the landing and gain a foothold on the coast. To prevent the enemy from gaining a foothold on the shore, Ottoman troops launched a counterattack. A bloody battle ensued, during which the British managed to withstand the onslaught of the enemy, who, having suffered losses, was forced to retreat to their original positions. Meanwhile, in Anzac Bay, the Allied detachments that had reached the coast came under heavy artillery and rifle fire from the Ottoman infantry division. The Allies suffered serious losses, but the landing continued. After 12,000 soldiers landed on the shore, the Allied troops attacked the fortified positions of the Ottoman army, but thanks to the reinforcements received, the Ottomans managed not only to hold back their onslaught, but also to push back. Thus, the Allies were blocked on a small stretch of the coast and began to suffer huge losses. Despite this, the landing of the Allied troops continued, and all the attacks of the Ottoman army were repulsed. Meanwhile, the French landing successfully landed on the Asian coast of the strait. Immediately after the landing, the French managed to occupy 2 villages, but very soon they were attacked by the arrived Ottoman division. After some time, the French command decided that they had completed the task of diverting the Ottoman forces, after which the French detachments, having repulsed several enemy attacks, boarded ships and were transferred to the main Allied forces on the Gallipoli Peninsula. After the arrival of the French detachments, the Allied landing on April 27 launched an offensive deep into the enemy's territory towards the city of Krithia. At 8 a.m. on April 28, after bombarding enemy positions from the sea, the Allied forces launched an offensive against the city of Krithia. According to the plan, the French forces on the right flank were to bind the enemy in battle while the main British forces were to maneuver to surround the city from the south and west. The plan turned out to be too complicated. In addition, they did not have time to acquaint all commanders with it. At the very beginning, the Allied offensive was quite successful, but as the enemy's resistance advanced, it intensified. Moving forward, the detachments on the left flank of the Allies reached the Calais Gorge, while trying to overcome which they came under heavy machine gun fire. The British detachments did not abandon their attempts to advance through the Calais Gorge. After some time they managed to cope with the task and capture the enemy positions on the slope of the gorge. The British continued their attack up the slope, but could not break the resistance of the enemy. In this situation, having suffered serious losses, the British troops had to retreat to their original positions. After the unsuccessful assault on Krithia, the British command realized that it would not be possible to quickly break the enemy's resistance and occupy the Gallipoli Peninsula with the available forces, as a result of which the hostilities acquired a positional character. The Allies began to strengthen their positions. Taking advantage of the resulting lull, the Ottoman command made 2 counteroffensive attempts on May 1 and 4. Both of these attempts were unsuccessful and, having suffered losses, the Ottomans were forced to return to their original positions. Meanwhile, the Allies received reinforcements in the form of Australian and New Zealand detachments. Thus, the total strength of the Allied army amounted to about 25,000 soldiers. As for the Ottomans, they were able to concentrate about 20,000 soldiers for the defense of the peninsula. Having received reinforcements, the Allied command developed a new plan of attack, which involved the capture of the city of Krithia and the nearby heights of Achi Baba. The problem was that aerial reconnaissance did not allow the Allied command to obtain detailed information about the enemy's defensive positions. For this reason, the artillery preparation that was carried out before the attack on the Ottoman fortifications proved to be ineffective. On May 6, at 11 o'clock in the morning, Allied detachments launched an attack on the city of Krithia from the western and southwestern direction. The attack of the French detachments was ineffective, but at the same time they still managed to occupy several Ottoman trenches. As for the British detachments, having fallen under powerful artillery and rifle fire from the Ottomans, on the first day of the attack they were able to advance no more than 300 meters and did not reach the enemy's main line of defense. On May 7, the Allied offensive continued even though the British suffered heavy losses on the first day of the attack. This time, the Allied attacks were more successful and the Ottomans, under their onslaught, had to leave the first line of their defense and retreat to the city of Krithia. The Allies failed to take the city itself, but because they suffered impressive losses. On May 8, the British command decided not to launch a new attack. Only on June 4 did the Allied command decide to launch a new attack on Krithia. The advancing Allied detachments came under intense fire from the Ottoman field artillery and were forced to retreat to their original positions. In turn, on June 5, the Ottomans attempted a counteroffensive, which also turned out to be unsuccessful. Because of what the Ottomans also had to return to their positions. In early August, the British command decided to land additional forces in Suvla Bay in order to break through the Ottoman defences through a joint attack with Australian and New Zealand troops located near the bay, and then attack Krithia from the north. The landing of British detachments in Suvla Bay began on August 6, 1915. Some time after the landing, the British detachment managed to take the hills near the bay, but they could not move further. On August 9, when the landing of the main forces was completed, the British troops again launched an offensive, as a result of which they managed to take the heights of Chunuk Bair. Already on May 10, the Ottoman troops under the command of Mustafa Kemal launched a counterattack, as a result of which the British were driven out from the heights of Chunuk Bair. On August 12 and 15, the British Army launched 2 attacks on enemy positions, as a result of which the British lost an entire regiment, but could not break through the Ottoman defences. By the end of August, it became clear that the Dardanelles operation had been unsuccessful. For a long time, active hostilities were not conducted on the Gallipoli Peninsula, and on December 7, the British command ordered the evacuation of its troops from the peninsula. This ended the Dardanelles operation. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell so you don't miss new videos.